I'm Wendy Pearson, the director of the Stockbridge Library, Museum, and Archives. When John Gillespie proposed a poetry series in March of 2020, we imagined a 1-month-long series of readings, which seemed a dream come true for a poetry-loving librarian. 1 year later, our series is still going strong, connecting the poetry community throughout the nation. We are so grateful to all of the poets who have generously shared their work and read during our series. You can view some of their readings here or visit our website at stockbridgelibrary.org. Please enjoy this outpouring of talent that will make you laugh, make you weep, make you nod your head in understanding, and make you rejoice in life. Happy Poetry Month.
My name is John Gillespie. I'm the board president of the Stockbridge Library, Museum, and Archives in Stockbridge, Massachusetts. As the pandemic started to accelerate in March 2020, I talked with Wendy Pearson, our library director, about a program to celebrate National Poetry Month. This program would be a weekly refuge for all of us navigating severe uncertainty about work, family, and communities. The program, Poetry, Medicine for the Soul, started last April, and we've had 49 weeks of amazing poetry since then. We've been blessed with continued support from the poetry community. To celebrate the 2021 National Poetry Month, we asked our poets to create a short video of their work. Enjoy the following videos, and we hope to see you at one of our Wednesday 1 p.m. poetry hours. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Ken Haas. My poetry website is kenhaas.org, and my new book is called Borrowed Light. I'm going to read a couple of poems in honor of National Poetry Month, which I think is extra meaningful this year, because poetry is both an antidote to isolation and a witnessing, a noticing of what's true. And one of the obvious things that has been noticed during the pandemic is that while many of us sheltered humans miss our normal connections to the natural world, nature does not appear to miss us. Fish and swans have returned to the Venice canals. Grass has grown up through the cobblestones of Prague. The Himalayas are visible again from Kathmandu. Penguins have been seen in the streets of Chicago, etc. So I wanted to take this opportunity to read 2 eco-poems. For about a decade now, I've been engaged in a poetic dialogue with my mentor and friend, Brenda Hillman, about the amazing monarch butterflies, which are threatened with extinction. This first piece is Brenda's from her most recent book, Extra Hidden Life Among the Days, and it's called On Monarchs Again, Especially the Stripes. Or perhaps we could care less carefully now that they fluttered in the forest with mid-gold clinging to their going. Their cadence became our anxiety, night vision, to rest as a speckled gleam, an ochre glance. The days can sometimes give them what they need. That's pretty obvious. Triangles of orange, an extra weight has been dispatched. We are visitors, and only briefly at that. One more flutter, as if from the spirit world, glittering, time looks on, souls as seeds ready to rise and stay, as if color has chosen to live no matter what. It both is and isn't a metaphor. The second piece is mine, and an example of so-called concrete or visual poetry, which aims to create a poem where the pictorial element and the verbal significance read on one another. This particular poem is about the great annual cooperative migration of monarch butterflies from Mexico to the top of North America, which involves about 500,000 individual butterflies and takes 4 generations annually. yet they often roost by the hundreds or thousands in the same trees along the way, and how they do that is magical and mysterious. This poem contrasts their form of society and government with ours. It's called Monarchy, and I'll hold it up after I read it so you can see how it looks. Monarchy. Country of air with a scatter of groves. Michoacan winter, Michigan spring, same oaks and pines year after year. Kingdom of leaving, migrant the native, birthright pure flutter, no throne passed down, just a memory of branches and how to arrive. Nation in motion, 2,000 miles, nectaring milkweed, Halloween colors, finding old haunts in league with the dead. State of grace, 10 deep, in 1,000 row drape, transient monument, home without claims, this huddle of wings, this body of flames. And I'll hold it up. It'll appear backwards because of how the camera works, but you should get a pretty good idea because it's symmetrical. So there's some great videos of the monarch migration on YouTube and other sites, so please check them out. And in the meantime, have a marvelous National Poetry Month 2021. Thanks.
I'm Holly Iglesias, and I love National Poetry Month, especially when it comes on the heels of Black History Month, and then Women's History Month, then National Poetry Month. I love the poster, I like the Pocket Poems project, and I like the excuse to be able to read poems aloud, share poems together during the month. The poem I'm going to read today is by the Chilean poet Jorge Teilhard, which I will read in Spanish first, and then I'll read my translation. The title of the poem in English is To Talk with the Dead. Para hablar con los muertos. Para hablar con los muertos, hay que elegir palabras que ellos reconozcan tan fácilmente como sus manos reconocían el pelaje de sus perros en la oscuridad. Palabras claras y tranquilas como el agua del torrente domesticada en la copa, o las sillas ordenadas por la madre después que se han ido los invitados. Palabras que la noche acoja como los pantanos a los fuegos fatuos. Para hablar con los muertos hay que saber esperar. Ellos son miedosos como los primeros pasos de un niño. Pero si tenemos paciencia, un día nos responderán. Con una hoja de álamo atrapada por un espejo roto, con una llama de súbito reanimada en la chimenea, con un regreso oscuro de pájaros frente a la mirada de una muchacha que aguarda inmóvil en un umbral. To talk with the dead. To talk with the dead, you must choose words they'd recognize as easily as their hands recognize their dog's coat in the dark. Words calm and clear as the torrent tamed in the cup, or the chairs the mother puts back after the guests have gone. Words that the night might welcome like the marsh welcomes a will-o'-the-wisp. To talk with the dead, you must know how to wait. They are fearful like a child's first steps. But if you're patient, one day they will reply. With a poplar leaf caught in a broken mirror, a flame suddenly revived in the hearth. The dark return of birds, passing a girl who waits, gazing and still, in the doorway. Thank you.
I'm Lawrence Robb, and I'm going to read a poem of mine called A Children's Story. This poem began its life with an actual little story that I wrote with my grandson, Noah. It took us 10, 15 minutes with illustrations. When I came upon this story sometime later, I thought, I can do something with this. I can take it somewhere. I didn't know where, but for me, that's the pleasure of writing a poem, not knowing, trying to follow some clue, a bit of narration, a tone of voice, so that I might surprise myself, might discover what I didn't know I had to say. And I may also have thought then of something I used to tell my students, which is, any poem can be improved by including a dog, which is more or less true. And I probably added, and the poem will be even better if the dog speaks, which is definitely true. The poem is in 4 sections. A children's story. A man was walking in the rain when he found a dog. He took the dog home. The dog was glad to be out of the rain. The man gave the dog a bowl of water, and the dog fell asleep by the fire. Then a boy knocked on the door and asked the man if he'd seen his dog. "No," said the man. The boy started to cry. "Okay," the man said, "I have your dog. But right now, the dog is sleeping. Why don't you wait for a while?" "No," said the boy. "It's late, and I have to go home." 2. The man stood on the porch watching them leave. He wasn't sure how to feel. A bird flew down and perched on the railing. "Listen to me," the bird said. "That boy just tricked you. His dog really isn't his dog." The man found the boy and took the dog. The boy began to cry. The man said, "You're not going to fool me this time." 3. On the way home, a wolf came out of the woods. The wolf said, "That bird was lying to you." "Why would a bird do that?" asked the man. "Nature is all deception," replied the wolf. "Look at me. I'm not going to eat you. I just came to tell you the truth." The wolf headed back into the woods, and the man and the dog went home. The dog fell asleep by the fire. 4. But the man kept wondering, who should I believe? What should I do? "Pay attention to me," said the fire. "Everything I touch, I have to destroy." "What kind of answer is that?" asked the man. But the fire had said all it wanted to say. Then the dog woke up and went over to the man and sat down beside him. "Look at me," the dog said, without speaking. "Look at me, and I will help you understand." The man stared into the dog's eyes. "You will never know," the dog said, "to whom I belong." Thank you.
I wanted to wish John Gillespie happy birthday. On the possession of horses. Their heads hunker forward when they canter, as if only one direction were possible, and they don't understand fire. They gallop back to a burning barn. Nothing about horses compels me now, though once I wanted to be one. What do horses have to do with love? The quivering limbs of their bodies, their hearts chiseled from stone, and riders cling to them as if just this holding on, this staying on could be everything. Once an entire village banned horses. You couldn't blame them after all the trouble. 1 minute normal and the next. The children were possessed, leaving their comfortable beds at night, cavorting with horses from all around under the laden apple trees. No one knows how they planned it. They rode horses by moonlight, bareback and bare-assed, even in thunderstorms. When horses trot and canter, their hooves clatter, their bones chime like funeral bells, like clappers. They ring against the earth. Their heavy hooves beat against the earth. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Malachi Black. My website is www.malachyblack.com, and I'm delighted to be reading for you on the occasion of the Stockbridge Library Association's National Poetry Month tribute. I adore National Poetry Month. I admit that all months are forms of National Poetry Month in my house, but I rejoice in the occasion of National Poetry Month, specifically for its opportunity to pay tribute, which is exactly what I intend to do today. I want to share with you the work of a very well-known Lithuanian poet named Tomas Venclova. And when I say well-known, I mean very well-known within the nation of Lithuania, from which I am reading today in the capital city of Vilnius. I'll be reading to you from Tomas Venclova's selected poems in English translation in a volume entitled The Junction. This will be a beautiful text entitled In the Lake Region, which I will preface with some comments on the nature of poetry from his text after the lecture. This is Venclova on poetry. Poetry comes into being before we do, and even before language. It arises first in the soundless realm of nothingness. A poem rests and dreams about itself, and our task is to disturb these dreams, to lead it out of them, out of the void, into the streets of syntax and of sound. And now, out of the spirit of tribute, or in the spirit of tribute, both, I will be reading to you Tomas Venclova's poem, In the Lake Region. When you open the door, everything falls into place. The little ferry by the wharf, fir trees and tuyas. An old woman feeding ducks seems as old as Leni Riefenstahl. At the base of the hill, chestnut trees not yet in full bloom are younger, but probably as old as her films. All is wet and bright. A hedgehog or God knows whose soul is rummaging in last year's leaves. Dead water and living water fill the plain. The twins Celsius and Fahrenheit are predicting spring weather, while a shadow obscures the past, just like the present. The first serene weeks scour the bridges in a peaceful corner of Europe between Wannsee and Potsdam, where much has happened, but probably nothing more will. For days, we have been watching a ragged crow in the garden, sometimes on the roof. The ancients would have said her stubbornness augurs something. Emerging from the wood's depths, she lights on one antenna crossbar, then another, her surface bright as mercury in a thermometer's glass. But these are fever marks we are incapable of understanding. The beginning of agony? The past does not enlighten us, but still it attempts to say something. Perhaps the crow knows more about us and about history's dirt than we do ourselves. Of what does she want to remind us? Of the black photos, the black headphones of radio operators, the black signatures under documents, of the unarmed with their frozen pupils, of the prisoner's boot or the trunk of the refugee? Probably not. We will remember this anyway, though it won't make us any wiser. The bird signifies only stoicism and patience. If you ask for them, your request will be granted.
I'm Jeffrey Harrison. I want to wish everybody a happy National Poetry Month, and I want to thank the Stockbridge Library for all that they've done during the pandemic with their reading series. I'm going to read a poem from my newest book, Between Lakes, published by Four-Way Books. And I'm going to share my screen because the poem is about a photograph, or inspired by a photograph at least, by Gary Winogrand. So I guess you'd call it an ekphrastic poem. For me, an ekphrastic poem can't really work unless I find some personal connection to the poem, which hopefully I did in this one. Here we go, sharing the screen. And hopefully you can see that. The poem is called Girl Carrying a Suitcase. It's a couple pages long. Girl carrying a suitcase. Younger in the photo than my daughter is now, 18 or 19, the same age as my wife when I first met her. She would now be not quite old enough to be my mother. More like an older cousin I saw only in summer and would steal glimpses of or find ways to be near. Just as I kept circling back to this girl's photograph at the exhibition to study again the way her body bends slightly to the right to offset the weight of her fabric-covered suitcase against the lighter raffia bag in her other hand. The tapered cut of her sleeveless dress printed with black-eyed Susans, one centered over a breast, and the way her silver bracelets gather at her wrists below the almost dimples on the inside of her elbows, the photo's shadowed foci. And since bringing home the postcard I bought at the museum shop, I've been searching her image like a figure recovered from my own past. Someone I almost recognize, though her head is veiled in glare and her hair coming loose from her braids conceals the right side of her face. She gazes downward toward the sidewalk she has just stepped onto from the busy crosswalk, unhurried and alone amid the crowd of the cities she is either leaving or returning to, but not arriving in for the first time. She is too unguarded, lost in herself, thinking perhaps of whoever she has just been staying with or is about to visit. Someone who, whether cousin, friend, parent, or lover, must surely adore her. If only I could find her and show her this photograph, which almost certainly she has never seen, since it was printed for the first time only recently, decades after the photographer's death. Or at least send her this postcard I've been keeping on my desk these last few weeks, giving this stolen glimpse of her past back to her, so she too might be taken by this young woman who was once herself, like someone held dear who left long ago, then one late afternoon shows up at the door. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Peter Filkins, and if you'd like to find out more about my work and myself, you can look at my website, peterfilkins.com. I want to thank Wendy and John for the invitation to read at Stockbridge Library this past year. It's always a delight to contribute to National Poetry Month in April, and particularly this year because I have a new book that is coming out, Water Music, has a slash between the two words, which will be published on April 6th. I'll be doing a number of readings, virtual readings at bookstores across the country, but it was a delight last month to sort of debut the collection at the Stockbridge Library. The first poem that I'm going to read from is a poem called Blood Moon Blues. The blood moon is often what is referred to as the harvest moon, or also when we have a full eclipse of the moon. However, it has an even more technical term. A blood moon technically is the last of 4 full eclipses separated by 6 months each, with no partial eclipses in between. And it's a fairly rare event. Between 1580 and 1909, there were no blood moons whatsoever, and there were only a handful of them in the 20th century. The last was in September 2015, which I happened to witness, saw it rise over Cape Cod off of Wellfleet. And that was a time, of course, when things were heating up in our world. Elections, refugees, wars, various terrorist attacks, various catastrophes. And they've been very much with us, particularly in this past year during the pandemic. So it seemed a fitting poem to offer as a tribute to this series and National Poetry Month. Blood Moon Blues. Protesters marched, shutting down cities. Senators sponsored their own annuities. Car bombs were back, hemlines higher. Forecasters tracked low fronts and fires. Children were told their parents were thugs. Governments banned playgrounds and hugs. Analysts mourned stagnating markets. Terrorists surveyed expanded new targets. Refugees crossed invisible borders, arriving malnourished, colder and poorer. High up above, a blood moon rose. The seas churned on, the shore decomposed. Venus and Mars ascended in unison. Glaciers kept forming palatial ruins, while higher yet, at the back of space, a star imploded, leaving no trace but hydrogen and helium, the seeds of our genus, potent as love or a neutral virus. As I said, there is a slash between water and music in the title of the book itself, and I think the book tries to explore the boundaries between culture and history and nature itself. Certainly that first poem has a lot to do with history, and the second I'd like to read has a lot to do with just nature itself, simply called Turtle. It was inspired by my driving on a back road and seeing a giant snapping turtle in spring, obviously crossing the road to lay its eggs from one side to the other, and being sort of so contained within itself and its own activity in nature that there was something admirable about it. Turtle. Shy panzer of the swamp, atavistic in your haughty calm, you blink at us encapsulated in our swanky Prius, crossing the road from the prehistoric world you're going to or coming from, to lay your eggs in the sandy bed of tomorrow, knowing like the dead that however slow, it indeed will come, and does, even if absent of you, sanguine, curmudgeonly, immemorial as mud, or the memory of mud, propelling you on as you cling to your path through fan-tailed ferns that flood our eyes with green heraldry, fresh and real. Thank you very much.
Hi there, my name is Adam O. Davis. I'm the author of Index of Haunted Houses, which was published last September by Sarabande Books. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you as ever to the Stockbridge Library Association for making this possible. And happy Poetry Month to all of you poetry lovers at home. I know for me personally, every month is Poetry Month, but it's nice to have something set aside so that we can incorporate the national consciousness into our love of language and letters. I'm going to read one, possibly two poems if the mood feels right, from my debut collection, Index of Haunted Houses. The first poem I'll read is the first poem in the book, and it's called The Bell System, and it refers to Mary, Jane, and Pat, who, those are the first names of the women who basically lent their voices to the Bell System's automated telephone service. So back in the old days, when we used to call a number and no one was there, it was disconnected, you get a little dial tone, that doo-doo-doo, and then you would get a very lovely kind of soothing female voice on the line telling you that the person you're looking for is no longer there, but you should try again. So these women function as a kind of Greek chorus or spirit guide throughout the collection. And this is the first poem, The Bell System. Good night, Mary, Jane, Pat. Sleep tight, you sweet operators of America. Your voices strung like laundry, across this nation drowsy with a full century's worth of light. There's nothing you can't tell me that I haven't already heard, gift-wrapped in your general American grace. But still I wonder in what chamber of a horse's ant-eaten skull I'll recover my youth. Our human garden grows rich in these green suburbs, and what I feel is not so much loss as a lessening, as if the self was nothing more than a late model sedan crossing the city limit in search of better resale value. It's funny, this franchise of molecules that fizzes up in each of us, like motels viral along the interstate, some full while others flicker and die. When will the stars rain down like cheap plaster? When will language be little more than dandruff shaken from our heads? Ladies, you tell me the number I've been calling has been disconnected, but where did the person it belonged to go? Alone on the line, I find only a prairie alive with funneled wind, a nation heavy with wheat and light. Its chorus of dim voices locked in a kind of pharmaceutical sleep. I find a system unchanged, charged with electrical pulses that send the receiver scurrying in their cradle. The longhand breath of ghosts rising through switchboards to ask, who's there? Well, tell me, who is there? Who goes? Ladies, please wake up. I want to try again. I've got just enough time here. I'll read one more. This jumps to about 3/4 of the way through the book itself. We get back together with Mary Jane and Pat. This is Ghosts of the Bell System. Ringing. Ringing. Mary, Jane, Pat, rooms everywhere are ringing. Rattan furniture is rotting along with my breakfast. Ladies, my morning bowl of cereal and glass of orange juice, ringing. Children at play are ringing, and the cars that confront them are ringing, are slowing to observe their ringing, are thinking of the reclining chairs that await them in the junk yard, in the locus of all rot, where everything is rotten, everything rotting. Ladies, everything is ringing as you always said it would. But I didn't know then. I didn't listen. I knew neither of rot nor ringing, and now your words aren't ringing. They sustain pitch. They arc like swans in my cochlea's cul-de-sac. They nest there, and I ask you, ladies, please, for 3 more minutes sleep. Thank you very much.
Hi, Wendy Mnookin here. First, I'd like to thank the Stockbridge Library for all they've been doing for poets and poetry throughout this year. It's been really wonderful to have that connection. Thank you. Because the series was called Medicine for the Soul, I'm going to read 2 poems that approach the idea of healing and how we help others and ourselves. The first is called Hardbacked Chair, and it's from my book, The Moon Makes Its Own Plea. We've been having the same fight for decades. I don't believe it anymore, not really, but it may be the last good fight we have in us. So when I'm tired and dark arrives before 4, and harlequin frogs are dying out, not from global warming exactly, but from algae that proliferate because of global warming. When Liz has spent her 20th day in the hospital, I have no patience for your silences, no time. Why can't you share your feelings? Liz is dying. I turn my back to the window and cry. There's so much to mourn for. While you go to Liz's hospital room and sit in that chair all night, and when she wakes, terrified, you tell her she isn't dead. The second poem I'd like to read is from my book To Get Here. which deals with the issues our family faced around my son's drug addiction. And this comes towards the end of the book, and it's called Celebration. I'll fill my wedding vase with deep-veined lilies, harlot asters. Pollen will dust the table where I mass them every week. I'll gift myself with all the books I left on bookstore shelves, insisting I had no room for more. I'll give away clothes, everything beige and gray. From now on, it's crimson, teal blue. I'll be known for my chiffon scarves. I'll have 20 people for dinner and make roast duck with cherries, even though the recipe has verbs like deglaze and julienne. I'll grow my hair to my waist, wear hammered silver earrings. If my son buys drugs on every corner, if his face grows gaunt and the bones on his wrist seem too fragile for the weight of a hand, I will learn French. I will spend a month walking through small country villages in Bordeaux, stopping each evening for wine, a meal. And National Poetry Month is upon us, as are several other wonderful events. The proliferation of vaccines and their availability, and spring. So I wish you all the best National Poetry Month ever, and may you all have a healthy, restorative April.
Hello, I'm Cami Thomas. I am very thankful to the Stockbridge Library and John Gillespie, and I want to say that I love National Poetry Month because it's a time in the year when people who might ordinarily not think about poetry too much might hear and see a bit more of it, and that's got to be a good thing. I'm going to read one poem of mine that comes from our time of the pandemic, and it's about a pair of great horned owls who have lived across the street from me in this conservation land next door for a couple of years, and this is about a sighting of the female. In the 4th month of the pandemic, up comes the huge tufted head, cocked to the side. She seems to stare at me from the top of the pine tree, round yellow eyes with thick brows, broad honey-colored chest. Eases out a wing, ducks her head under, rhythmically cleaning. I want to stay until dusk, watch her lethal, silent descent on prey in the field next door. Everything must still look okay through her eyes. Small me, far below, pulling up my mask in the carless street. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Susanna Case for National Poetry Month. This is a poem from my most recent book, Dead Shark on the N Train, and it's titled Two Girls, One Removed. It was written to honor a childhood friend of mine who died last year. After I phone to say I'm concerned you're wasting your life with deficient roam and adventure, you poo-poo me. I mind my own business, and we both grow teeth in our vaginas, dress our lust to eat men alive. You go the tight clothes and thigh-high boots route. I dye my hair red, wear fishnet hose. Lucky to be born later, we escape lobotomies, homes for wayward girls, electric shocks. We curl up on the couch to study adults for more clues on how to be temptress, bitch, witch. The race is on to turn men into pigs. You go for the married ones, those who might have gotten you drowned or burned quicker. I quiet down, firm up, figure out when to keep mouth and legs shut and when to open them. In the end, we carry blame, remain victims of our aspirations. We rue reaching a time when they hardly matter. Like the 100th song in last year's top 100, anything we try is ignored. On the way to our Waterloo, your cold coda wishes down like an impossible dagger. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Emily Pettis, and what Poetry Month means to me is usually a time to discover lots of great new poets and what they're writing. Sometimes a time to join a group of people in an attempt to write a poem a day, and sometimes a time to feel guilty, like I should be doing more than I'm doing. I'm going to read a poem called Pardon Me, Yes Please, No Thank You. It's from my manuscript in progress, and it was published in Cosmonauts Avenue. Pardon me, yes please, no thank you. Fear that I will muddle my manners, fear that I will matter little, fear that I will dither like a biddy, bobble like a budgie, fear of being sidelined like a sideshow, fear of aging, fear of raging, fear of plagiarizing parables, fear of valuables, of valuing dreck, fear of being fearful, being feared, of being fearless when my fear would better serve, fear of being ignorant, imposing, closing down all apertures, of curating suburbia, fear of verbiage, fear of loosening the white tongue on my snow-white sneakers, no, the sneak tongue of my snow-white sisters, no, the cis tongue of the norm gifters who say what's what, who's who, fear of you. Fear of failing all my foremothers, of mothering the forefathers, of mucking in their mess, miedo de perder mi niñez, fear of passing on my passive posture, posturing, of pandering, of putting airs on top of sentiment, fear of sediment cementing. And I'm the author of this collection, House of Sugar, House of Stone, that was published in 2016 by the Center for Literary Publishing. And my website is www.emilyperez.org. Happy Poetry Month.
Hello, my name is Dane Servine, and my website is my name, daneservine.typepad.com. I'm really happy to be here celebrating National Poetry Month. I was a member of Poetry Santa Cruz, a small town south of San Francisco, and a member of the 16 Rivers Northern California Collaborative Poetry Group. I'm really happy to be joining with other readers and poets to celebrate coming together like this. I thought I'd read two poems from my brand new book with 16 Rivers Press, entitled The World is God's Language. It's a Simone Weil quote, the political activist and mystic from France. And the first one, since we've been asked to comment a bit on National Poetry Month, so I'm going to read two. These are small prose poems. And the first one has kind of a wry commentary on our political moment. And the next one is a bit of eco-poetics from also published in another anthology that I'll mention. This first one is Presidential Mask. Wandering the vast shopping malls of Kyoto, my wife darts into a small shop, poses next to a contorted rubber mask of Trump, all grimace and orange hair. It is a macabre likeness, not unlike any mask of power. Even the shoguns might be impressed with its snarl. But the centuries make a caricature of power, and even a president may find his head stuck like a mannequin in some lost stall of the world. The next poem, as I mentioned, was included in the University of Georgia's a ghost fishing anthology, a marvelous collection of eco poetry. And one of the poems I had included there is called The Dreams of Antelope. In Yellowstone, wolves were reintroduced into the mountains and then fed again on the antelope, which stopped overeating the willow trees. So the birds returned to sing, and beavers started making dams again from the small branches, resurrecting the marshes. And once more, everything started turning green because a wild predator was allowed back into the dreams of antelope. So greetings to everyone from Santa Cruz, California on the West Coast, and celebrating National Poetry Month. Bravo.
Hello everyone, my name is Owen Lewis. My website is Owen Lewis Poet. I'm very pleased to be sharing a poem on this series and want to thank John so much for having organized this weekly series over the past year. I had read in October from my new book, or what was then my new book, Field Light, which is a weave of Berkshire's history and personal history. I'm going to read one new poem, and it's called First Inoculation, and it's for my granddaughter, who at the time was, let's say, 3 months old. It was early April of last year. And, the idea of an inoculation against COVID was, we didn't know how far off. And here I was in a spring snowstorm driving with my daughter and my granddaughter for her to get her first inoculation. And so much about vaccinations and what we could and couldn't vaccinate against were swirling around in my mind. I should mention also, I'm a physician, so this poem comes out of, let's say, physicianly concerns as well as grandfatherly concerns. First inoculation for my granddaughter. In a dense spring snow, we set out, the baby sleeping, my daughter silent, directions robotic, precise, flakes as large as leaves, splatter and thud. In the parking lot of a closed school, like a spacecraft, a silver Airstream mobile, health services in metallic blue, this is health care in the time of this virus. I wait in the car without music, the droning, self-replicating news, colleagues conscripted to the city's front lines, inserting IVs and intubation tubes. I'm consigned to wait while the baby gets an injection. 7 disease relics, scourges few young doctors have heard, hear, a whooping, cough, frightened children, steam tents, rigid spasms, tetanus death or polio, myelitis. I remember the summer I couldn't swim, pool closed, edict of county health commissioner. We trusted government decisions, mother's pale worries, Life magazines, iron lung photos, taken away from me, away. The crippled children couldn't run on, crutches on legs flimsy thin as summer wax beams we wash and wash again. The windshield thick, whatever this snow is, trees should be green, this Blizzard, fear, blizzarding. Soon I will get them home. By loud radio channels, sonic barriers of sound, soundways, struggled rush, inspiration, expiration, force ventilation pushing into virus-swollen airways, pathways through the hospital's yellow tapes of danger, of what and how and when. Dear child, children, can we inoculate against this flurry, this fake news of epidemiologies failing, this new dark age of disease, this new lockjaw on truth? I can't see through this out-of-season storm, this knocking, this thudding I hear now, this crying. Turn the key is the baby crying, and yes, she cries, and I hear the safety belts click. Her mother says, all good, all good. I repeat to myself, all good, all good. Thank you.
Hello, friends of the Stockbridge Library. My name is James Davis. My website is jamesdavispoet.com. And I can't think about National Poetry Month without thinking of the first line of T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland, which is, of course, April is the cruelest month. And I don't know if whoever decided that this celebration should be in April was thinking of the wasteland when they made that decision, but it seems appropriate that National Poetry Month is in some way a celebration of melancholy and the difficult emotions and parts of ourselves that poetry helps us kind of thaw out. So I'm going to read a couple poems that are somewhat melancholic. Sorry to bum everyone out. I'm going to read one poem from my book. It's called Club Q, and it just came out in October. And the poem is called The Dunes, and it's a pantoum. And if you don't know what a pantoum is, all you really need to know is that every line in a pantoum repeats exactly once. So, The Dunes. The older brother throws rocks at the sparrows. That's what boys are supposed to do. The younger brother sits in tears, in protest, under a lone cottonwood. That's what boys are supposed to do when innocents suffer. His father says this protest under the lonely cottonwood is evidence of weakness. Be strong when innocents suffer, his father says. The dunes are purpling like a bruise, evidence of weakness. Strength is a foundation of stone, not sand. The dunes are blacker than a bruise. The stepmother's pimento cheese is a foundation of stone. Her sandwiches are unpleasant, but serve their purpose. The stepmother's pimento cheese refuses to leave. It lasts for days, which are unpleasant, but serve their purpose. The family eats in silence in their camper, refusing to leave, their last days eaten up in the silent, familiar camper. The older brother throws rocks at the sparrows. The younger brother sits in tears. And I'm going to read one more poem by Jericho Brown from his second book, The New Testament. If you haven't read Jericho Brown, any place is good to start, but I just was rereading this book, and this poem jumped out at me, and it's called What the Holy Do, and it has an epigraph that's a dedication. It says, for Previn Keith Butler, 1978 to 2009. Back when I was God, I had friends. We wrote our own Bible and got thrown out of church. Then I saw one of us again, a man pushing into him from behind. He turned his final face to the camera like a teenager coming upon a pimple in the mirror. The lonely worship alone. I search out such filth in the cathedral of my home, but this time, with a sheet, I covered the screen. That's what the holy do to the body after shutting its eyes. And that's this scribe's last vision of another poorly recorded life. As I talk to myself in late July, dragging a fan behind me like an oxygen tank. Thank you, and happy April.
Hi, this is Kaki Wilkinson, and first I just wanted to say thank you to John Gillespie and the Stockbridge Library for organizing this really great series during the pandemic. I hope lots of people have gotten to enjoy the poets who have come to read and the videos that we're producing for National Poetry Month. I'm going to read a poem from my third collection, The Survival Expo, which is coming out this June of 2021. And it's a poem that comes towards the end of the book. It's just a little sonnet. It's called Suppositions for Skeptics. Suppose we've undersold the rhapsody, more apt to graph a gap or galaxy. We voted no on maybe, pigeonholed our hope like so much extra seed we told ourselves we wouldn't need. Suppose we'd known. Just as a stream exploits the cracks in stone, fear works its witchy runnels through a brain parched hard with thought. We show up late, explain we've missed the code, or anyway, the cue. Suppose we quit apologizing too, released from woe is me and unashamed of what went wrong. Suppose the signs we blamed, each score and semaphore, were meant to say, go slower. Much of this will be okay. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Sarah Trudgeon. I'm a poet living in Great Barrington, Massachusetts, and I'm also the literary director for the Pittsfield nonprofit, The Mastheads. I first want to say thank you to the Stockbridge Library and to John for organizing these poetry readings. It was so great in the beginning of the pandemic and throughout to have something else, something really engaging and joyful to concentrate on. So thank you guys so much for doing this. I am going to read a poem today that was published in the Yale Review just before the pandemic started. It was this 200th anniversary issue, and there was a party celebrating it. And to me, it felt like the last party on Earth. And I think we all have that party. We remember the last party we went to before there were no more parties. So I just want to read this poem because it reminded me of that fun time and hopefully more fun times to come. It's called Don't Let Me Down. Don't let me down. My husband says he doesn't really like short stories, says only novels capture the human experience. But he does not mean how in novels you always learn about the people's childhoods, even though you do. He's writing a book about how he became a writer. It's a gambit. So he asked if I had a formative narrative about myself as a writer. But what? I don't think I do. He does. The clouds look awfully large today and awfully low. White bright, but somehow menacing. Our toddler woke the other night, and when I went to check on him, he just whispered sadly, "He got me." He often dreams of tigers. Then last night, I dreamed of a tiger. It was standing on a lake, lapping water the way they do in documentaries, and then it chased me down a street in my own neighborhood, where I live now, anyway. I did not grow up in a neighborhood. A road with a gas station is the joke I make for the East Coast elites with whom I now associate. Similarly, I can never believe my husband really loves me, even though he does. His novel got translated into Chinese. I had a dream last night. I was some kind of god, I think, is what he said to me this morning. In mine, I paid a woman $7 for a donut, and then there was the tiger. I woke up when he got me. Thanks. Happy Poetry Month.
Good evening. This is Stephen Rotiner. I'm the Poet Laureate from Arlington, Massachusetts. I'm delighted to be able to contribute 2 poems for this Poetry Month sharing. As a laureate, I began a project a year ago in response to COVID. It was called the Red Letter Project, and once a week we send out a new poem that travels not only across Massachusetts, but actually across the country. It began by drawing on Arlington poets and then eventually poets from all throughout the Commonwealth. And I decided I'll read 2 of the poems from the series, one that's from a local poet, Teresa Cater, and one from myself. The first one, Teresa's poem, is set in Arlington. It has as its heart a quote from the Bible, and I'll try to see if I can indicate with my voice when you're hearing that biblical quote. And it's called The Season of Our Sundering. Under locust trees, in the blossoming park by Town Hall, masked and unmasked walkers dip hands in the fountain pool, cool on this hot day, a limbic throwback to summers at Walden or Long Pond, a day's release from work. Near a young pear tree, I sit on a stone bench in noon sun, watch my country divide. She that was great among nations, Jeremiah grieved, and princess among the provinces, how is it she become tributary? She weepeth sore in the night. Our resident ER doc posts to the town Facebook list, help us save lives, help us flatten. Jeremiah was thrown into a cistern of mud, despised, imprisoned. And whatever prayer is, I pray for the mocked and the deniers. My breathlessness is easing. I can walk upstairs, stroll here like the others. I have no God to talk to, though I try. And my poem is called Gratitude. It's a poem in 5 sections, and it has a series of glimpses of people under difficult circumstances and how they still somehow find a way to be grateful for what we have. So here's the poem called Gratitude. While sleet scarred the dark pane white, she sat at a back table in Starbucks, sipping slow from her empty cup, hour after hour. And judging by the look on her face, each sip was more delicious than the last. Mathematics, 10 from Guatemala, shared the 2-room, 4th floor walk-up. The 5 from the night shift returned home each morning at 8. Waiting for the day shift workers to vacate their beds so they too could partake in sleep's modest infinite. And still Hector managed to wire $35 most weeks to Antigua, making sure the clerk spelled it correctly. Te amo, mi querida. Hands pressed together, palm to palm, with the pane of the nursing home window between them. When, reluctantly, they each drew away from this brief everlasting, the woman's larger imprint and the child's small took a half second to vanish from the cooling glass. After the 3rd surgery, her bald head creased like a dry riverbed. The doctors let my sister know she was out of options. She proved them wrong, continued caring for her gathered family, loving the small mercies and even the waning days. Nowhere in medicine do they explain that joy, too, is an option. I can see now that the never enough I've lived with all my life was always, and much to my chagrin, more than. I wanted to share these poems because I think sometimes we do this, especially we perfectionists, and I think that's true for poets. We want everything to be just so, more than. It needs to be more than. But in this case, it was just enough. In fact, just enough is more than. It's enough to get us by. And I think from the poems that I've been able to share, the ones I've been reading on this site, they're reminders that we always have that more than enough to draw on. Thanks for letting me share.
Hi, I'm Jessica Lazar. I'm very happy to be part of this tribute for the Stockbridge Library Association. Thank you so much, John, for having me and all of us. Happy National Poetry Month 2021. I hope we all come out of this month having found a way to love some new branch of poetry we didn't know we loved. I'm going to share two poems today. One is from my book, Sergei Kuzmich from All Sides. It's my first book, published by Letter Machine Editions in 2019. It's called Libido. Not a Hopper painting, but a photo of our street in his day. Horseshit covering the unpaved way, and the pharmacy in essentially the same place as today. My dull branch, too wet to flame, is that olfactory sense gone missing. Our nose bleeds from the grief. If any laughing soul became a circle and swore to loop a dance all night and roll it out like money carpets, a person exiting would think to walk libido, the dog of wonders. How quickly focus comes to view, the thing I'm looking at you through, the thing I look away into. You, the telescope, take from my gaze, but a kaleidoscope takes its place. I summer in its triple vision, my calendar clothes, a clock on the wall. I love to remember myself in that season, bathing rarely, pining with each new hand, my father calling about his will. The conversation that ensued became my inheritance, the way we discuss wills, not what we put in them. Still, my stares differentiated then. Suitors climbed until their souls went up, like pools committed to aerial memory, a collection of laps timed to nations that form and disperse, contraries they interview me toward. Now, avoiding all obvious rising suns, fist in my mouth, I am the West. All right, next I'm going to share a poem by A.E. Housman. I love this poem because it does what I would call poetic math, which is to say it seems to offer, a kind of logic that strikes me as purely of poetry and not of anything else. Loveliest of trees, the cherry now, is hung with bloom along the bough and stands about the woodland ride, wearing white for Eastertide. Now, of my 80 years and 10, 20 will not come again, and take from 70 springs a score, it only leaves me 50 more, and since to look at things in bloom, 50 springs are little room, about the woodlands I will go, to see the cherry hung with snow. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Ellen Steinbaum, and I thank John Gillespie for the pleasure and opportunity to do this in celebration of National Poetry Month. I'm going to read two of my poems. The first one is specifically in honor of National Poetry Month, which I always enjoy, particularly for its opportunity to meet the work of poets whose work I did not know. This is called The Meaning of Poems. I never liked the crusts. ate childhood sandwiches to their brown edge, stopped there, left tooth-scalloped mastodon bones on my plate. But that's where all the vitamins are, they told me. All the vitamins are in the crust. When I bake bread, I stir, let yeast grow light in salted water, knead in flour, flattening with my palm, folding over until smooth. I shape it, braid or boule, baguette or loaf. Bake till it taps hollow at the bottom. I slide it, steaming, fragrant from the oven. Realize I've neglected once again to put the vitamins in the crust. And I'm going to read this, which, rather than being set in April, is very noticeably August, but it is a wish that I wish for all of us. It's called Birthday for Jim. The acorns startle in their loud dropping to the street, pinging off the hoods of cars and wood porch railings. And we are at the windows, watching as a squirrel has scaled the arbor, swings precariously, stretching out for grapes, taking its fill and letting excess fall to stone. The air is filled with herb and earth, umami, fifth taste after salty, bitter, sour, sweet. The taste of dark, of deep and full, of fall and hidden wine. And now below the murmuring, the wish swims up warm and sunlit. This. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Aaron Caicedo Kimura, and my website address is aaroncaicedo-kimura.com. Many, many thanks to John Gillespie and Wendy Pearson for all that they do in bringing poetry to the Stockbridge Library community and beyond, really. I'd like to read two poems for you by two of my favorite authors. The first one is Fine Work with Pitch and Copper by William Carlos Williams. He always brings me back to the things that are really important to me in a poem, and those two things are image and sound. Fine Work with Pitch and Copper. Now they are resting in the fleckless light, separately in unison, like the sacks of sifted stone stacked regularly by twos about the flat roof, ready after lunch to be opened and strewn. The copper in 8-foot strips has been beaten lengthwise down the center at right angles and lies ready to edge the coping. One still chewing picks up a copper strip and runs his eye along it. The second poem is a poem by Jane Kenyon, and it's entitled Coming Home at Twilight in Late Summer. We turned into the drive, and gravel flew up from the tires like sparks from a fire. So much to be done, the unpacking, the mail and papers. The grass needed mowing. We climbed stiffly out of the car. The shut-off engine ticked as it cooled. And then we noticed the pear tree, the limbs so heavy with fruit they nearly touched the ground. We went out to the meadow. Our steps made black holes in the grass, and we each took a pear and ate and were grateful. Sometimes I think of those pears as poems, and National Poetry Month is a special time when we all can pass those pears around, favorite poems we've loved for years, or poems that we've just discovered, and we can all partake and be grateful.
Hello, my name is Hillary Jackman. I'm a poet in Baltimore, Maryland. I don't have a website, but I do have a collection of poems called Missing Persons, which is available from Waywiser Press. The poem I'd like to read today is called Man Eater. One of the things that's been hard during the pandemic is working remotely. This is a poem about a former colleague of mine who made a really big impression. And I hope you enjoy it. Maneater. She cornered me at the copier to gloat about blind dates in oyster bars, the suits, investment bankers, Swiss economists, who Amex blacked plateaus of fruits de mer, 24 blue points mounted, belly up, on mounds of diamond salt, or blinis flecked with Sar Imperial, then ringed with snails. She flirted with each Gucci'd money man down double G&Ts and Back Bay walk-ups, flashed a little or a lot of leg, but braless, cinched in strapless silk, resisted betting them. She porked the king of kosher meat instead. The Jews, she bragged, at least the Hasidim, think I'm some loose Sephardi, vanished from the tribe. The kind of semi-shiksa you show off to Rabbi Gold. I keep reminding Max I'm just a Spanish girl from San Jose who can't tell tzitzit from kasha varnish case, but he's convinced, I shit you not, that we're swept up in some postmodern West Side story. Did I mention that on our third date, I cooked him shrimp and grits with bacon grease? He licked the Wedgwood clean. Quasi-heroic, too, was each pedestrian disaster she relayed in hyperbolic tones. Her Papillon, that epileptic mutt whose piss destroyed a parquet floor. Her stolen Mazda, stripped, stuck up on blocks. A kind of blessing. No more parking tickets. Each tragedy took a month to tell, but even working overtime, half numb from hunger, I couldn't wait to hear the next outrageous narrative. Her verve, her braggadocio, her ex-fiancé let her keep the princess-cut engagement ring, was awe-inspiring. She spun those tales like some low-rent Scheherazade, as if her life depended on the arc. She'd storm in breathless, late, her fitted suit an eggplant gleam and spill her guts, blowjobs, blown job interviews, or porterhouses black with truffle butter. It was all the same to her, an equivalence of passion. She works for light and power now, some office straddling a strike-slip fault. When darkness falls, I hear it barely strafes her. Divorced, remarried, 7 months along, she play-acts all the smutty bits in Cock and Bull. She's equal parts cracked solitaire and scorched torchon, still digging on her knees for something missing. A stack of naked Polaroids, a secret wedding band. Always finding it. Thank you so much, and thank you to John, Wendy, and the Stockbridge Library for hosting me.
Hi, this is Peter Schmidt, and I'd like to thank John and Wendy and everyone at Stockbridge Library for inviting me to participate in this terrific series. When I read in December, it happened to be not only my birthday, but the launch of my virtual tour for my new collection of poems called Goodbye Apostrophe from Regal House Publishing. Here's a poem called The Hands. On a ledge above the kitchen door, our mother set the plaster casts of our hands. Like little pies left there to cool, we'd stuck all our fingers into. First mine, then 3 years later at the same kindergarten, before he started going to special schools, my brother's, for a not quite matched set. The doctor said he would never read. But after school, our mother quietly closed his door and sat with him in an open book for hours before she made dinner. When frustration got the best of him, he'd run from the house, slamming the kitchen door, and the little blue plates of our hands would waver, not wave. They stayed up there for years, where a horseshoe might have hung. But it wasn't by luck that he now reads. When we moved, our mother held each hand in her own, then stacked them in a box. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name's Peter Klein, and you can find me online at www.peterkleinpoetry.com. It's such a pleasure to do this tribute for the Stockbridge Library for National Poetry Month. I spent 6 months in Lenox, just down the road from the Stockbridge Library, and so I'm so glad to be able to contribute. I'm going to read 2 poems for you today, and these are related poems. The first is a poem by Charles Wright. The poem is called Future Tense, and it's from his wonderful collection Sestets. And I'm pairing it with one of my own poems from my collection Mirror Forms for a couple reasons. First of all, the poem that I'm going to read from Mirror Forms, my book, takes one of the lines from Charles Wright's poem and incorporates it into my own poem. But also, in general, Charles Wright's book Sestets was a kind of immediate influence for me for my book Mirror Forms. Charles Wright was my mentor at the University of Virginia, and just a poet who I've admired so much, particularly in this collection of his Sestets, in which he develops a 6-line form and kind of investigates all the different possible ways to use it over this collection. So this is Charles Wright's poem, Future Tense, from Sestets. Future Tense. All things, in the end, are bittersweet. An empty gaze, a little way station just beyond silence. If you can't delight in the everyday, you have no future here. And if you can, no future either. And time, black dog, will sniff you out and lick your lean cheeks and lie down beside you, warm, real close, and will not move. So the second poem that I'm going to read is from my collection Mirror Forms. So here is that collection. It came out from Parlor Press at the beginning of 2020. And this is the poem Radio Physics from Mirror Forms. Radio Physics. The station beyond silence broadcasts negative. Each agitated wave flatlines into balance. Vowels and consonants whose music moved through time are posted in white frames in the station beyond silence. Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Jessica Piazza, and for National Poetry Month, I wanted to read something for the Stockbridge Library, but because this is a celebration of poetry, I'd like to not read my own work, though you're welcome to go to jessicapiazza.com to find it if you'd like. But for now, I want to read some work by a couple of poets I love, Ross Gay and Kay Ryan, because they're beautiful and short and show what poetry can do in just a little bit of space. So I'm going to start with the Kay Ryan poem, and it's called That Will to Divest. That will to divest. Action creates a taste for itself, meaning once you've swept the shelves of spoons and plates you kept for guests, it gets harder not to also simplify the larder, not to dismiss rooms, not to divest yourself of all the chairs but one, not to test what singleness can bear once you've begun. That's Kay Ryan. Kay Ryan is amazing. And as is Ross Gay, whose poem I'll read for you next. A small, needful fact is that Eric Garner worked for some time for the Parks and Rec Horticultural Department, which means perhaps that with his very large hands, perhaps in all likelihood, he put gently into the earth some plants, which most likely, some of them in all likelihood, continue to grow, continue to do what such plants do, like house and feed small and necessary creatures, like being pleasant to touch and smell, like converting sunlight into food, like making it easier for us to breathe. I hope you all have a really, really beautiful National Poetry Month.
Hi, I'm Howie Fairstein, and I'll be reading at the Stockbridge Library sometime in May. As far as National Poetry Month, April, I think we should have National Poetry Month throughout the whole year. I'm going to read a poem from Gagoots and Other Poems, my second collection. The poem is called I Had Buckets. There were Arctic ice dams and bent, busted eaves in that ramshackle house in the woods, ceiling falling, plaster peeling, lath exposed. And I had buckets, though of different colors, strategically placed, so the 5 cats, exiles also, could lap water at any time in any room. That was when my nails began breaking, then bleeding, my first term as a professor, age 50, having left the city to teach argument to college freshmen. The chair provided advice. Just remember you're smarter than they are. And the students questioned why I wore bandages on every finger, and I confessed my envy of them and lectured them on rhetorical formulas when composing essays on controversial issues. For instance, capital punishment, how my father had killed 2 men in self-defense, he'd said. Environmental sustainability, how Mao's 4 Pests campaign eradicated sparrows, leading to the Great Famine when 20 million perished and the locusts grew fat. And we spent a class on Stalin's Night of the Murdered Poets when we took up censorship. Also how Alan Freed's rock and roll show was banned in Boston. And later in the semester, I spoke of the silence between brothers, of young men in India dialing wrong numbers, hoping for love, on the rising mortality rate among white midlife Americans, and how I've always wanted, in the soft wallow of time, to witness snow falling over an ocean. Then I told them about my ex-wife's abortion, never mentioning the father. And I think I'll do one more short poem. It's about a bird called the fox sparrow, a migrant that comes in early in the spring and late in the fall. It's called To the Wary Fox Sparrow Rustling in the Leaf Litter. I have never given up on you, your sporadic visitations. Live on through the present extinction. Never abandon me no matter my home. Visit me in the 3rd month of the year of my death. Visit me again in the 11th month. Always signal the end of winter as you mark its beginning. Thank you.
Hi, I'm James Arthur. My website is jamesarthurpoetry.com, and I'm glad to be here celebrating National Poetry Month with the Stockbridge Library Association. Today I'm going to read a poem by one of my heroes, the poet Richard Kenny, and then after that I'm going to recite a poem of my own. So the poem by Richard Kenny is called The One Strand River. Here is Ring Terrain, and here is Ring Marine. This is the lower troposphere in the middle Holocene. This is a water clock. This is a green rain. This is a sundial filed sharp on the slant of the sunlight's grain. Look, a watchwork iris. Here its bronze spring. I think of the story of Osiris, figured on a ring. This is an eye ungluing. the copper green change. Here is the tide of the One Strand River, lapping ring terrain. Gray goose and gander, how long have we together? Green, the memory of love, as blue, a change of weather. Rain, 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 scattering down the sky, where heart's an armillary sphere of rainbows in the eye. Now the water clock, a trickle under rhyme, and oh, I fear for the good king's daughter crossing over time. I stand on the bank of the One Strand River, river blue nor green, and where is now with the good king's daughter over Ring Marine? And this second poem, the poem of my own, was inspired by a visit to Blarney Castle with my family, I guess 5 or 6 years ago, and we kissed the Blarney Stone. My wife and I each kissed the Blarney Stone according to a tradition. If you kiss the Blarney Stone, you acquire the gift of the gab and become highly persuasive from that point on. So this poem is called Eloquence. I too have been to Blarney and done the thing, the kiss, with a line of other paid-up kissers behind me, each waiting for a turn. I leaned out backward from the castle parapet into nothingness. One touch of lips to stone, they say, and you'll be eloquent all your life. My eyes were shut, so I couldn't see the upside-down abyss between me and the world below, or small figures on the ground, or any garden archipelago of green. But clutching the iron safety bar, I brought my mouth to that damp stone, whose country roughness had been rubbed away by lips of every shape and hue and tone. I want things from poetry that it could never give. Power to undo, to mend, to compel forgiveness and forgive. I know kissing the Blarney Stone is just a thing to do, to say you've done, but I thought, give me a silver tongue. Reader, if you're there, help me play the fool without becoming one, so I can be something more than a lover from afar, something more than a small-town mayor in a dictator's tie, something more than a centaur at the wedding feast with a horse's heart thumping a few feet below his human one.
Hello, and thank you for stopping here to hear my brief tribute to National Poetry Month, April 2021. I am Karen Lalonde Alanier, and I will read in the Stockbridge Library Poetry Series on April 28th. Find my website at alanier.com. Because poetry is what keeps me alive, having a whole month to celebrate my life spirit is a special gift. Hats off to John Gillespie and Wendy Pearson for amazing weekly programs. I know how hard it is to keep up such a schedule. I'm going to read a poem from my brand new book, How We Hold On. Sunset from the cliffs involves at its close the bending of light, which the narrator sees as a momentary flash of green at sunset. Otherwise, this poem is about breaches of reality in a place that seems to be paradise. Sunset from the cliffs. The bride wore black, Dolphins cut the waves, fin seen first. Bird of paradise, lobster claw, hibiscus, all tongues and beaks leaned in close, like gossips, or a Greek chorus singing Marley's "Could You Be Loved?" How did her store burn down after the police stopped him from bulldozing the place? The dark dog Coco circled, lay at the groom's feet, and the hired minister left little man Zacchaeus to his tree. Then the red balloon sun slipped with a flash of green into the sea. Thank you for your attentive ear.
Hello, my name is Erica Cheris Moling, and I want to thank John Gillespie and the Stockbridge Library for putting together this wonderful series, a year strong now, for people to interact with poetry in the midst of a really tough time. I think poetry has this sort of unique ability to meet people in times of great duress or great celebration, right? Weddings, funerals, poems are reached for in those moments, and there's a reason for that. So I wanted to share with you a poem that I wrote for a friend who was going through a really hard time. And it was one of these situations where she lived far away, and I really didn't know how I could help. And so the poem became my way of trying to be a good friend to her, of trying to offer her something. And she tells me that she slept with it for months, and that it did help her profoundly. So I offer it to all of you, for anyone who's going through a tough time, who might need a little something. May this poem be that for you in this moment. It's called Benediction for Everyday Losses. May the falling tree topple slowly away from your roof. Let the lights go out long enough for candles, but return before everything is spoiled. Bless the tireless ghost of a girl who runs circles and circles around your hips like a hula hoop. May your bones be motion and grace all of your days. Would that the value of things you save go up, and the cure for what ails you go down easy as warm soup. May you keep all you can swallow. May you miss only the next turn. Let the road wander nameless until it finds you at the edge of an abandoned field, yours for a time. May the stillness of that field remember you, as an umbrella, though mislaid, still remembers the hand that opened it. Bestow the solitude with each word you've misplaced in your sternum's deepest closet. Would that the windowsill be full of questions, the doors bloom with guests, and the bed hold sudden cuddles with a boy who's suddenly grown. Grant the hands that cradled you never forget the shape of your head, though the names and places shift in their minds like sea dunes. Release the waves that crash into what was lost. Dear tidal heart, allow your chest to fall after every rising. May your ribs always remember the songs they learned at sea. Let everything you lose overboard sink, except that which preserves you. Would that the warped boards of you float, sound little ship. May you lie back, your ears muted and full of open water. Happy National Poetry Month, Stockbridge. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Angela Driven, and my website is angeladriven.com. Very quickly, the impact for me about National Poetry Month is a lot like going to a parade. Parades always feel like I'm either gathering with people who want to celebrate what I want to celebrate, we all believe in it, or a making of our own joy. But either way, it feels like a gathering, like a parade of joy. This first poem is Glory in Her Gourd. It is an eco-theo, and it comes from a love for gardening and a love for my faith, but always trying to understand what my faith is. And gender is a very complicated topic in some religions. And so this is that contemplation in the garden. Glory in her gourd. How do I deserve a bumblebee in my squash flower? Honey bearers endangered orchestrate through pheromones and dance. And what of this? Squash flower. How can I believe Adam came first when the flower precedes the fruit? Primary yellow and splayed wide open, the bloom always knows first what is coming. Hours before the storm, her flower crumples into itself, splay and shut, splay and shut. The way kindliness and brutality, touch, gentle and not, passes between the legs of a woman, until the time the flower begins to grow a gourd, swollen, hard, long, and bulging, as though the squash is at once man and woman. I tell my partner I am as much as him. Remind him writing is as important as accounting, although it pays nothing. I tell him he does not see me. He replies, but I do, I love you. To love and to see are not the same. Urging him to look at me, I want this morning to be a squash flower, splayed open, unguarded. Bring me coffee, my sturdy cucurbitacea, and let it be for this morning only the birdsong that enters me. This other one, many years ago, I saw a cow standing by a fence with a look on its face one morning, and I looked into the ditch and there was a baby, a calf, and that scene has stuck with me ever since, and about how we all find ourselves standing at that fence. On fences after loss, she stands by the fence, unmoving, yielding to hornflies, taking their blood meals, watches her loss in a ditch, beyond her reach. It is hard to tell if she is working out how to retrieve what has gotten away from her, or shear the connection on barbed wire fence and be done, or if she feels obligated to punish herself by looking only at her loss, as though it is her fault. Her newborn calf slid beneath fencing, down the rain-slicked bank to the gravel road. Or is she waiting for a stranger to care enough to salvage what has been lost and bring it back to her? And I'll tell you, I did pick up the calf and get it back in the fence and bring what she had lost back to her. Thank you so much for listening. Happy National Poetry Month.